Hey, this is Chadillac, and you're back with the Chadillac Chat. This is the Cage Rage podcast, and I'm here with my guest tonight, Devin Miller. Devin, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Chad, man. I'm doing a lot better than those people.
Quit bullshitting. I know you're fucking pissed off. Stop it. You're mad. You're mad because all the technology in the world can't solve some stupid little error that is happening because you don't know how to fix it, and that's fine.
But at the same time, I'm doing a whole lot better than the people down in South Florida and in the Bahamas are right now. So
that's for sure, brother. That's for sure. We send them our love and our best, and you know that sounds cliche and kind of silly in my eyes, but
And in reality, Chad, I've got a heavy heart a little bit, man. My community got hit this week big time.
Tell me about that. There's something in it was at Gas City.
Yeah, a little 10-year-old girl came up missing Friday, and there's been, really the whole community banded together to, really look for her, and it turns out that she was strangled by her stepmom and thrown into a shed, and they found her this morning, and it's just terrible, man. I mean, I can't imagine that moment going to that level of evil to where you would strangle a little 10-year-old girl. And I mean it's hard for good people to even fathom something like that.
Well, Devin, you know where I live in Carroll County, which
Delphi.
Technically I don't, but the Delphi Girls.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even want to invoke their names. I don't want to say any of that stuff. But in the county that I grew up in Carroll County, Indiana, which there turns out to be two Carroll counties in Indiana. I don't know how that is. One of them spelled slightly different. But in little tiny Carroll County, Indiana, in the capital of Carroll County, which is Delphi, Indiana, or if you were to pronounce it correctly, Delphi. That's how far behind we are. We pronounce it Delphi instead of Delphi. But to have that happen, I think we're going on 4 years now. Maybe 3 years. I don't know, but it's
has it been that long?
It was, man. It's been a long time. Maybe 3 years, but it absolutely hammered us, and it brought me to a place when it happened. I was in great shape. I was kayaking. I was doing all this stuff, and I called in and I said, "Hey, have you found those girls yet?" And they were like, "No, we haven't found them. We're taking all help we can get." And I said, "I'm an expert kayaker. I can get through any of the creeks around here. Tell me where to go. I'll bring my kayaks and I'll be there. And I'll bring a bullhorn and I'll yell for them, and the whole works." And as it turned out, as I was pulling out of my driveway, my wife pulled in and she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to help look for those girls in Delphi. These two little girls missing." And my wife said, they found them. And I go, "Oh, they found them." And she goes, "No, they found them." And the sinking in my chest that happened from that was so undescribable. I don't even know how to classify that, because I could not imagine it other than when I was in, Rhonda was a sophomore. I'd been a freshman, and a girl who was a grade above us, I'm not going to mention her name. I'm friends with her brother on Facebook and stuff like that. They were twins. And she was murdered by a guy that was working at the high school. And we had dropped acid that day and walked out. It was like the third time I'd ever done microdots. I'd ever done acid, period. So it probably wasn't even LSD. It was probably a different form of psychedelics, but it was microdot either way. It was orange barrel. And so this would have been 86, 85 or 86, 85 for me. And because I was a freshman, and I was walking out the door, and we walked by this guy, and he let all of us take a drag off of his cigarette as he was, getting the this little square area ready with concrete to walk into the swimming pool. And he let all of us take a drag off of his cigarette as we walked by. And I think it was pretty obvious to him that, we were the partiers of the class because, we're out there whacking tennis balls over the clear into the cornfields. And this one friend of mine, Daryl, I'll call him, Daryl S, I'll even call him. If his church found out about this, they'd lose their minds. Sat in a circle, dribbling a basketball like this, and looking down and walking in a circle. And the next few hours, all of a sudden, this girl comes up missing, and no one can find her. And they didn't think anything of it. They thought, well, something.
She'll be back. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they found her 2 days later in a creek. And doesn't that seem like they always find them in a creek? They always find them in a creek by a bridge. And there's something to that. And I've been watching this. It's kind of a cheesy series on Netflix that I've been watching. Somehow I got hooked on it. The first series, the first show, I turned it off and I said, I'll never watch that again. And something drew me back to it. I had to see it again because at the end of it, they meet this serial killer in jail. It's called Mind Hunters, and it's on Netflix. And the acting is really pretty bad, and it's cosmetically ugly, and everything seems pedestrian about it. Everything that could be bad about a film is bad, except the content drags you into it and just will not let you go until you see the end of it. And right now, as of last night, I'm on the part where they're getting ready to catch the Atlanta City child murderer that had strangled all those children. He didn't even sexually assault them. He just strangled them. And there was some sexual gratification in it, but I don't remember what it was. I'm sure I'm getting ready to see tonight. But the point is that it's everywhere, and it's been everywhere. And I remember growing up when we had 3 channels, and that was on every channel. And last night on that show, they said, it's 10:30. Parents, do you know where your children are?
I was going to say, I remember that from as it was the scariest words ever.
And I just went, oh my God, I can't believe this is so real. This is happening right now. And we act like school shootings just happened yesterday. And they've been happening for decades now. And we act like children disappearing and sex rings and all these horrible fucking things that happen to little kids. And remember, we were little kids when this was happening. And they act like it just started.
Yeah, it's really weird. I mean,
Take me, Devin. Tell me about that, man. Because it blows my mind, man. It blows my mind.
Well, there's like some beauty out of the disaster too, though, because almost every time I've seen these kind of scenarios happen, like close to home, you see how communities really rally. All of a sudden, all the division among ourselves goes out the window when it comes, especially when it comes to kids, and people rally behind the effort to find and bring home these kids. And even if you like this girl in Gas City, I didn't know her. This had nothing to do with me, but it still gets you emotional because you're human and you understand, that, I have a 7-year-old and I could only imagine somebody trying to harm him. And I think that's something that, even in our depravity, even in all of our, ugliness and all of our fallen state that we are in as a species, we still have that level of decency to us to where we understand that those that are vulnerable and weak and among us, that, the vast majority of the good people find that so repulsive. And, we've been covering here on the Cage Rage podcast. I mean, it seems like the last 2 times I've talked to you, we've been talking about just abuse of the most weak and vulnerable among us, of children, and it's just good people I don't really feel like can fathom that level of evil. They can't. I cannot imagine, because you look at this woman's Facebook page, and it seems like she was a pretty decent stepmom and mother to these kids, very active in their lives. But it sounds like she had a temper issue. And can you imagine losing your temper to the point where you're choking?
Not like that.
Yeah, you're choking a 10-year-old until they're lifeless. Like, I mean, you would think once they
Devin, you and I both know what it takes to choke somebody unconscious because of jiu-jitsu, right? And MMA. To choke somebody conscious, you put them here in what used to be called the sleeper hold. It's the Monteleone, or rear naked choke, and you put them there and you squeeze all that together. In other words, you take this hole and you make it much smaller, and you squeeze these 2 arteries. They go to sleep, and they literally go to sleep in seconds. To kill somebody, you can't just squeeze them and then they go to sleep, because they wake back up.
You're intentionally killing them. Yeah.
To kill somebody by strangulation, that you have to, however you do that, whatever that is,
how the level of depravity to go there? That's
man. What the fuck is wrong with people?
I know that's how I feel. It's like I can't imagine that scenario of being there, like being in that moment with a young child.
I don't.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Like I said,
I don't understand it, man. I don't get that, and I cannot fathom how somebody could. I don't know how somebody could do that to another human being, other than, if I were really, really mad at somebody and they'd done something horrible to me, they'd hurt my family, they'd hurt my child, they'd done something terrible, my son. Yeah, I can see me not losing my temper and doing that. I can see me being completely calm and doing that. I mean, and that's just the truth. That's the truth. And I don't care who likes it or who doesn't. That's the truth. But for somebody to be mad enough at a 10-year-old little girl to choke her to death, what the fuck is wrong with you? What is fucking wrong with you?
And one of the reports I saw that just broke my heart was that she was known to, always carry like a little backpack and this blanket on her, I guess. And just that little thought just got me kind of emotional, thinking about just a little 10-year-old girl that wants to have a certain blanket with her. And I mean, there's just humanity in this little girl, and it's sick and evil. It's something that you can't even really put into words. Like, how do you describe that? Like, how do you plunge into that depth of depravity?
Devin, here's the thing. Here's what I want to ask you. Is there something that happens to that person? Not 20 years ago, which could be too, but I'm not trying to address that with this question. Is there something that happens to that person in that moment, in that day, where she burnt the pancakes and they spilled cereal on the floor, and the dog ran out as it shit on the floor, and the car ran out of gas, and and then somebody hit him that didn't have insurance.
This perfect storm scenario is what you're like.
Yeah, I mean, is that what that is?
I don't know what it is. I mean, there's a lot.
Why do people go to a school with 300 fucking rounds of ammunition and shoot children? Okay, go. If you're gonna shoot somebody, For God's sakes, go kill somebody who deserves it. Why are you shooting children? Why do we have this problem?
I mean, you can call it. There's always like some questions I always ask with this stuff. I mean, you can call it what you want. You can call it.
Sorry.
What?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I got carried away there.
I'm talking about you can call it demonic possession. You can call it some kind of mental illness. The first question that typically I always go to is what drugs were these people on? Because we've seen cases of perfectly normal mothers and stuff that all of a sudden drown their babies in a bathtub and finds out later that they're on some kind of crazy antidepressants and SSRIs. And I mean, there's like entire websites dedicated to SSRI stories of people going
No.
That doesn't happen.
I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I'm saying there's plenty. The idea that you can take. Let's go back to the first one, Prozac, that was really popular. The idea that you can take a cocktail of Prozac and Valium, and somehow that's going to lead you to go out and kill people, or commit suicide. Either one. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
It most certainly does. Almost all these.
I know it happens, but that is not to blame for this. There's something else going on that has nothing to do with drugs. That has nothing to do with there's something happening with sociologically where people feel so. I don't know.
Did you see this video over the past week of that couple walking with their kids down the sidewalk, and that crazy woman just walked up and she cut the nose of one of the children and started attacking the other children, and the husband had to chase her into the street. She just randomly was just walking by and just attacked him. Yeah, it was a crazy looking video. And we just mass shootings are happening on a regular basis now.
Okay, here's one. Here's a personal one. We used to run a not-for-profit called the Simply Soda Children's Foundation, which my wife had the idea of starting because we were laying in bed one night, and I said, "What do people do that have kids that are in the situation of my son?" My son has traumatic brain injury, in case you don't know that. And it's really bad. And I said, what do people do? Because they said, 75% break up in the first 3 months, 85% in the next 6 months. And then after that, it dwindles down from there. And there's about 3% that actually stay together for the child, to stay together with the child after he's been injured or her has been injured. Now that's if you only have one child. When they have more than one child, that decreases dramatically. I mean, it just nosedives. And they just put them away and be done because they have so much to take care of. And they already have children that are healthy. So they go, well, that one's done. We got to get rid of it and forget about it. Right? So we were laying in bed and I said, what do these people do who don't have two people to back them up, etc.? And she said, well, they die. And I said, I mean, shouldn't we do something about that? And she said, yes, we should. And so we started something called the Simply Soda Children's Foundation, which is now called Soda Fest, because we did it for 6 years and then we passed it on because it was just too much for us to keep going on. But my point to it is that the community can come together and they can help you and they can do all of these things. But what do we do as a community before any of that happens? Why aren't we looking at prevention instead of reactive consciousness?
Well, I believe that that's something that our society has. I mean, everything from medicine to everything that we typically we go for, what do they call typically with medicine these days? It's like a symptom treatment instead of actually finding out what's causing the problem in the first place. Like with
Yeah,
cancer,
yeah,
like
yeah.
we treat cancer, and we've gotten amazing at doing that. Thank God for our medical scientists and stuff because we've gotten a lot better at fighting and curing cancer.
We've gotten better at it.
Much better at it. We're not all the way there yet, but much better at it. The mortality rate, the survival rate of cancer now is a lot better. But we're still not. We're doing a horrible job of preventing it from coming because like people are getting cancer rates at crazy levels now.
Way higher. Way higher.
Yeah, exactly, and that's linked to a lot of different stuff in a whole new conversation. But what you're saying here is, we want to treat these things after they happen. How do we prevent them from happening? And I think that that's the right conversation to have. Yeah, we do need preventive measures, but I always say be careful how far you go with the preventive measures because, for example, one of the things that's coming out that a lot of things that are being proposed about to prevent mass shootings is starting to flag people online, like
Yep.
flagging incel boards, having
Incel is someone who
involuntarily celibate, and almost
they
all the
they
time.
they can't they just can't get a girlfriend, right?
These are typically young, sexually frustrated young men who we know them all. We've known them. They can't. They have very little friends. They can't.
I was one, weren't you? I mean, no matter how much you actually got, you always wanted more,
No,
right? I mean,
we're talking about socially alienated people who tend to become very frustrated, radicalized, angry. They're pissed off at the world, and
and it's somebody's fault, so they shoot them.
People.
Devin? Why do they pick? Why do they go to a school and shoot a bunch of people rather than that's not even their school most of the times? Why do they do that rather than go to a McDonald's? Like I always say, I used to say this. Yeah, or Walmart. I used to say because the first time I ever heard about a mass shooting, a guy walked into a McDonald's. This is in the late '80s. You'd have to look it up. I don't know the details on it. I just remember it. He walked into a Walmart with a machine gun and full Kevlar and opened up on a Walmart and killed 30 people or something crazy. And that's when the term going postal came about because the guy was from the post office. And then suddenly they started looking at it and they were like, well, we've had mass shootings from several people who worked at the post office because it's got to be on time. It's got to be right now. Can't be late, right? But it didn't happen with people from UPS. It just happened with people from the U.S. Post Office. And then, so they started calling it, I'm going postal. Somebody get mad and they go, I'm about to go postal. To where it was a joke. And I used to say to people when I would reach a level of utter despair and lethargy where I would say, I understand why somebody takes a machine gun to McDonald's now. And yeah, of course I would never do that, but I got to a point where, early on, man, in my 20s, I'm 48 fucking years old. In my 20s, I could say, I understand why somebody would go to a McDonald's with a machine gun. Because that idiot is just, that one tipped me over the edge, and I'm so mad that I'm going to go get drunk off my ass, and I'm going to get in a bar fight tonight, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, and going back to what we were talking about, preventive measures, I mean, that does scare me, though, about this chaining of online dialogue. What's going on right now with, most of the surveillance methods, it's not like one certain NSA guy just is assigned to you and other people. It's algorithmic. They've got algorithms that are scanning through all social media posts and dialogues and stuff, and
Yep.
and listening to conversations through the back doors that are being put into all these different appliances and stuff. Like I just, was reading an article about people getting locked out of their Tesla cars, and then other stuff about deep fake technology, new apps that are making deep fakes and stuff. Like there's all these different new technologies that are being put into the back door to where they can hear us, they can see us, and they're not sitting there listening to us, but their algorithms and their AI certainly are. And
then what? If the right set of terms comes up, weep, 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 and then they tune in.
Yeah.
Is that it? Is that it?
The thing is this. I understand the impulse to want to have this ability to prevent crises from happening. The thing is they can be abused. They can definitely be abused. We start setting up a system to where we are creating this electronic, prison planet where everything is censored, everything is controlled, everything is monitored. We turn into something like what we read about in 1984 with the telescreen, where you can't escape the telescreen. You don't dare even have certain. You keep a straight face when you're walking by the telescreen, because they can pick up any little impulse in your facial expressions. I mean, those are the stuff you read about in Orwell's 1984 is terrifying, and it's to think that we're there today, that they can even just read between the lines in our certain posts on message boards and on social media. So that concerns me. But then at the same time, the idea of doing nothing, of society doing nothing to set up structures that would prevent and flag these kind of incidents from happening, that concerns me too, that we're just going to stick our head in the sand.
Man, if I'm picking between the two, I'm saying keep your nose out of everybody's business, and a lot of this won't happen. If I got to pick, if I got to pick between the Patriot Act and where we're at right now, fuck the Patriot Act. That was a horrible thing we did. We turned over our lives, and that wasn't a slippery slope. That was a slip and slide that we knew we were going down way too fast, and we would never be able to control it.
Well, and because it's going to set up a system where we're completely monitored, and then Obama expanded on all of it with NDAA, making to where they can indefinitely detain you without a trial indefinitely. They just have to label you a terrorist.
A terrorist.
And
so now, so that brings me to something I've really wanted to cover today, because this morning before I left, I got on my Facebook, and someone that I follow was having troubles with the idea that they had seen a speaker, and when they had seen that speaker had talked about identity appropriation, which we'll get into in a minute, but more specifically, they were talking about reparations and white supremacy, and how white supremacy has literally built the entire world, which is fucking ridiculous to even consider. But I'll go with it for what it's worth for now. Okay. My response was, welcome to the club. Because if you have a white penis, which I'm not white, by the way, and I'm classified as white. I doubt Devin's white, but he's classified as white because the complexion of his skin. There can't be anything more racist than that, or more sexist than that. But because we have a lighter complected penis, we're not allowed to have a conversation about X, Y, or Z. We're not allowed to think these things. And one of the things this person said was, I had to even consider my own thoughts on this. In other words, this person was policing themselves so that they I'm trying to say this without giving up any identities. They were policing themselves so that they didn't get hung up in, oh, you're an apologetic for this or that. This person happens to be female, for whatever that's worth. So that removes anything about misogyny, you know, and then it comes up, oh, well, that's learned misogyny and blah, blah. Man, when are we going to stop playing word soup and start looking at the reality of situations and say, wait a minute, this group is taking advantage of a situation and they are trying to say, you know what, here's our shot. We're going to take advantage of it while we can. I'm not taking anything away from the idea of white privilege, of male privilege, of anything else, of racism, of anti-racism, of white supremacy. This has nothing to do with any of that.
What got us on this conversation?
That's what brought us to this conversation, is that we were talking about specifics of how people are changing and slippery slopes.
Okay.
And this slippery slope is where we're leading to. I'm a bleeding heart left liberal. I want food, housing, education, and shelter for every single man, woman, and child, including immigrants, in the United States of America. Period. No questions asked. That's what I want, because I'm a bleeding heart liberal. I'm as far left as you can get. And these people think I am a white socialist, or I'm sorry, a white nationalist, and that I don't have anything to do with socialism, and that I don't understand racism, and that I have nothing to talk about, and I can't say anything about sexism. And I'm like, you know what? Do you want to talk about sexism? Try to be a white man in college, sitting in a class right now, and say, I really feel offended by all of this because I have a white penis. And I feel like all of you are blaming me, and it's starting to spread. And finally, white women are starting to feel this. And by white, what the fuck is white? It's stupid to even say that.
Well, that's always been my big question, is what do they mean by white nationalists? Like, what do they like?
I'm not saying they don't exist.
I know that they exist. I mean, I could point you to some certain thinkers.
But how do you label it?
The thing that I just don't understand is the way what I've told you forever is I just feel like there's a disproportionate amount of attention given to something that's not that organized. It has very, 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 very little influence over what they're trying to group it as a whole right-wing movement in this country, because they try to yoke it up with the whole nationalist movement. And that's something me and you have talked a lot about, you know, I'm not like a big just Trump apologist, but they're getting it.
No, he's an idiot.
Well, they're just getting him so wrong, because they're trying to lump him up with people who are wanting to have like this separatist type of mentality on the terms of race. And that's not what the vast majority of Trump's base or him is advocating for. It's more about economic and political and national sovereignty is what it's more about. And it's more about...
But why is that so connected to Trump then?
It's been connected to Trump because there was white nationalists who came out and threw their support behind him.
I know that, but I know an awful lot of Trump supporters. Consider where I live, okay? I live in the middle. I live in the middle of cornfields in north central Indiana. I know so many people that I grew up with. I had teachers in class that said nigger, that they would say the N-word, you know, I mean, they just say it. Not like it was a big deal. I'm talking about the 80s, okay? So I realized things have changed, and they would make fun of women who talked about the glass ceiling. And they had mottos like, I had a teacher who had the motto, if you squat to pee, you don't play for me. That was one of his mottos. And that was reverberated throughout. And if this guy doesn't play football and join the team, you guys make sure he has an unpleasant life. Other than this one, and this one, because they have a health excuse not to play. God help the guy who didn't join the football team in 7th and 8th grade in my junior high school, because they were brutalized. We were sent to be radicals. So in that way, I understand how people can say Donald Trump is igniting this and he's leading them and inspiring them to come clean and to come out of the closet, so to speak. But I don't believe that. I don't think that's what the case is, because the people I talk to right here, you're right. They're worried about, number one, China. Number two, what their corn's going to do without China. Number three, we've been getting screwed by the whole world forever, and there's no such thing as global warming, which is so idiotic. I don't even know where to begin to talk to people about that. And then they will throw in, oh, not to mention, he's a N-word lover. He's a this, he's a that, blah, 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 blah. Obama's a N-word. I'm not going to, I've heard that so much that I'm almost immune to it.
I don't deny that those people exist. I never deny.
They deny in masses, and they follow Trump. That's the truth.
No, I agree that those people exist for sure. I just don't believe that defines the vast majority of his base or his message, especially.
Okay, let me ask you this then: if it's Donald Trump and Barack Obama, who do those people vote? Who do those people? The vast majority of the people, who are they going to vote for?
Of what people?
The vast majority of the people right now that we're talking about in this day and age, can Barack Obama beat Donald Trump in a presidential election in 2020?
I absolutely think that Obama could, because Obama was a very slick politician. He was a lot better of a candidate than what Hillary Clinton was, or the people that we're seeing on the stage right now. He was well groomed. He was articulate. He was likable, and he stuck to his message. He didn't seek to demonize his opponent as much as he did as inspiring, especially in 08. He didn't run as good as a campaign in 2012 as he did in 2008. But
agreed. He didn't have to.
It was, the media did a lot of that for him about demonizing Mitt Romney. I mean, when they were able to demonize Mitt Romney as some kind of right-wing radical, when he was about as centrist of a guy as you're ever going to find, if not left-leaning, and that's been shown
more left than Obama,
and that's been shown by him in his Senate campaign right now, where he's really literally the most hated Republican on the right, for sure.
Yeah.
Because he's such a centrist and so far to the left of the vast majority of the demographic in this country that votes right wing. But when it comes to Donald Trump and his messaging, we've talked about this before. It's mainly about the whole drain the swamp ideology. It's all about, they looked at him as an outsider that could go in and reform Washington, and he was preaching a nationalist message at a time of rampant globalism, where we were seeing our institutions, our national sovereignty, to be more autonomous in our dealings, being hollowed out to more international governing bodies. And no, I don't think there's really anybody that can say that that's not true. When you look at like the UN and the IMF and all these different international conglomerates that are having more of a unified type of policy for multiple nations. And I like that Trump is trying to get us out of these big bilateral trade agreements like NAFTA and and he immediately shut down the TPP when he assumed office. And he's trying to go to a more getting out of multilateral trade agreements and go into more bilateral, where we're gonna deal with countries on an individual basis from our
Right.
perspective for our interest. And he's been very good about that. And I think that there's a lot of corporate interest that hate him for that. Because those big trade deals were definitely designed and written by these international conglomerates. And that when you see a lot of even left-wing people who were Trump supporters during the campaign, right-leaning people that were Trump supporters during the campaign, a lot of them were seeing that Hollywood hates. Michael Moore summed it up best. He was like, we have a bad messaging problem when it comes to Trump right now because the right-wing establishment hates him. The left-wing establishment hates him. The media hates him. Hollywood hates him. Wall Street hates him. All these different organizations hate him so bad that he looks like the true outsider from the billionaire establishment. But then he's become president, and for 3 years he's really done very little to, whether that's him being unable to actually do what he intended to do, or he was a deep fake all along, which is, some stuff that we can talk about. But
I would argue that he's actually stuck to his game plan pretty hard, and just had a really hard time getting it through. That he hit the political wall, and he thought he was going to be able to leverage his way through it with executive order, and they've hit him with enough. We're gonna impeach you. You were screwing this girl, that girl, blah blah blah. There's did you get peed on? Everybody got mad when Obama, whatever happened with Monica Lewinsky and Obama and the blue dress. Everybody got mad about that on the left. That's my people, and said, how dare they interfere with his life? And I was like, you know what? He's the president. If the guy's not getting a BJ once a day, we got something wrong with this, because he needs one. Because that's stress, man. And he needs to cool out. So I'm good with that. I don't care how he does it. I'm good with it. He's not breaking any laws. I'm good with it. When Trump does something that happened long before he ever even ran for president, with some hooker or whatever, well, with a sex worker, which I completely and 100% am for. I'm for the rights of sex workers. I believe sex work should be 100% legal within reason. They have to be an adult and things like that, and they have to check out. That's the only way to make sex work safe. Otherwise, we're making them victims. But what I'm saying is that Trump is living in the double standard era. So the things that were okay for Bill Clinton are not okay for Donald Trump. Just like Donald Trump and Bill Clinton both knew Epstein. They both flew in his jet. Clinton flew in his jet a whole lot more than Trump ever did. And Trump's his best friend, and Bill Clinton, he never even knew Epstein.
Well,
what is going on there?
There's double standards on both sides, because it was very frustrating for me to see good Christian conservatives that I identify with very much all of a sudden be defending a serial adulterer who's committed adultery on multiple wives and is a known casino guy, after the way that they stood with such a moral posture during the Bill Clinton days. And that's just, we gave away every bit of our moral faculty to be preaching a social message of moral social standards that are just been completely dissolved in our country and are never coming back now. And I think that Trump is a big was a big fireball to that. I mean, but both sides have these kind of hypocritical stuff. Like, for example, the left wing acts like they just want to they have really no definition about what they want with immigration policy. Like, I always ask, so are you advocating open borders? Well, no, I'm not advocating open borders. Like, well, then what exactly are you advocating? Because it sounds a whole lot like you're basically just saying if they can penetrate our border and come in, they're welcome to stay, and there's nothing wrong with that. And have their
take down the cage in the concentration camps. Now what?
but let me continue real quick. But at the same time, they say that, but Obama had record deportations. Then on the right, you have, um, you know, a big bullet point social issue for the right wing is abortion. But since Trump's been in office, every single budget that he signed into law and approved its funding has fully funded Planned Parenthood. So it's just total hypocrisy on both sides. And then I get flamed by good people on the right that I respect and identify with when I say I can never, if I really stand on a principle that I will not vote for somebody who is actively approving funding for abortion, I can't vote for Trump. And they're like, oh, well, we got to start somewhere. Like, no, you're a hypocrite. You're saying that you won't do that, that you won't, that you will not vote for somebody that supports and appropriates funds for abortion, but then you go and vote for Trump. And the left wing's a hypocrite too when they say, oh, this, and they cry about immigration and stuff, but then they go out and they run to the polls, stand in line for 2 hours to vote for Obama, who's just has record deportation. So there's hypocrisy on both sides. And
hey Devin, can we agree on this? Can we just agree that there's absolutely no way through our system of legislative balances and checks and balances, that there's absolutely no way that we can get to the dream position without going through baby steps all the way. And it's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and then it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, and it all winds up equaling the same. And we move very, very slowly. What is going to be the thing that is going to make a cultural difference in that? And I'm going to let you take this over because I want to hear what you have to say. I want to know what we can do to have a true cultural revolution where people actually matter, where votes matter, where people can like it or not. This is what it is. So if abortion's illegal, it's illegal. If it's not, it's not. If gay marriage is legal, then it's legal. If it's not, then it's not, which is ridiculous. But I won't even. I'm trying not to take sides. If sex workers are legal, then they're legal. If drugs are legal, then they're legal. If they're not, they're not. When are we going to get to a point where we're going to be able to elect somebody who can actually come in and say, this is what I'm running on, and this is what I'm going to do, and they're going to do it? Who is that person? How does that work? Take me on that. Go.
Well, I would say I don't know who that person is, and I don't. Okay, I guess you're taking off, but I don't know who that person is, and I don't really care who that person is. I'm not really focused on trading in my principles for some form of political pragmatism for some politician to come in and to wield his executive power to have a totalitarian type of vision for government to where everybody has this uniform thought process where we all agree and, oh, well, this is legal, so I can't stand against it. This is illegal, so I can't protest for it. There's different worldviews. There's different, everybody talks about unity, but what are we willing to give up for that? And I'm going to wait for Chad to get back because I feel weird sitting here talking. I chose to wait till you got back, man. But to carry on the conversation. But what I was saying was I don't know who that person is. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I don't know who that person is, and I really don't. I'm not really focused on who that person is because I don't want a totalitarian system where we're all,
But
we got.
can we get to it?
I hope not. I hope we all have our
Why
own
do you
opinion.
why so explain to me why you don't want a system where we all fucking get along.
Because it's not human nature. I mean, we can have this type of like this type of form of thought control. The way we're going to get to that this fictional idea of unity is for totalitarianism to come in and start wielding this form of unity through executive order, that we're going to start programming people to think like autonomous robots. Like we're gonna start wielding thought control on them.
Okay,
Everybody's got.
so that takes me back to where I was at just a little bit ago, which is what brought us to this part where I was talking about the slip and slide, slippery slope, where I was talking about the friend that I follow on Facebook that said, she said that she feels like she cannot come out and talk about with her children. She cannot say, well, what have white people done? And she's got to, you and I, her, everybody on this podcast, basically, we almost by proxy have to identify as Caucasian, which in my case is absolutely nonsense. But still, I'm not allowed to identify as anything but Caucasian. And what she was saying was she saw this speaker, and afterwards she left and she thought, have white people done anything good? Or is everything in our history bad? Is it just in the last 200 years? Or is it 3,000 years? Where do we start at? Because first of all, let's go back to Egypt, and Pharaoh, let my people go, which was the Israelites fighting with the Egyptians about being enslaved. The reality of that was that the Egyptians realized, and it wasn't even the Egyptians, it was it's Iraq now. What the hell do we call it? I lost my train of thought there. But anyways, it doesn't matter. The idea is that they had more slaves than they had people. And they go, oh, wait a minute. We could be taken over by these people, and there's nothing we could do. So when they finally said, let my people go, that's not actually what happened. None of that is historical reality.
You're taking. I'm
wait. Follow me. Just follow me for a minute. So what I'm saying is this: she's looking for a spot in history where she can say, when can I say white pride? Why can I say black pride? Why can I say brown pride? Why can I say, Irish pride? Or, proud to be a German, proud to be an American, but I can't say I'm proud to be white. Why is that?
I mean, I'm not really the person to talk to about that because I don't really identify myself. I mean, that's not when it comes to who I identify myself with. White is not really like at the top of my list of the things like, oh, I'm a proud white man. I don't really care. Like, that's not something that I really care. But if we're having
but Devin, for those who do, who identifies as being proud of their race?
Are you asking me like just statistically who does?
Who statistically is proud of their race and is no. Let me make it easier for you. Among all races that we could list, what's the one race that cannot say, I'm proud of, white pride, basically?
Right? Yeah, that's been like a meme on Facebook for a long time about, I'm a proud black man, said the black man. I'm a proud brown. I'm a proud Latino, said the Latino. I'm a proud Asian, said the Asian. I'm a proud white man, said the racist. And
this girl who is a far left, ultra progressive human being, wonderful person. I know her well enough to say that I really trust her judgment, and I feel confident in saying that she is absolutely 100% a good person. And she suddenly feels this, and to her, she goes home and has to wait 3 days questioning her own judgment on whether or not she can even think this, let alone say it.
Well,
Doesn't that say everything? And can we talk about that? That's what I want to talk about.
well, I mean, I think that there's some things that can be said. Like I have no qualms at all about being very proud of European contributions to everything from political philosophy to the arts to what we got through the church to, I mean, the sciences and stuff. I mean, it was a lot of, basically all of history was advanced through white Europeans. I mean, that's just historical fact. And whether people want
Yeah,
to,
but when you say that, you completely negate the idea that white privilege allowed those people to steal intellectual rights from minorities and use them as white intellectual ideas and theologies and theories. And
yeah, but I don't really see too much evidence of that with Augustine and Aristotle and Plato and
well, first of all,
Copernicus and
those people weren't white. They weren't white. First of all, they were
well,
Greek.
a lot of them. I'm talking about European culture and
But,
whether it's Eastern
you
European
just said
and
Plato, Aristotle,
yeah,
Augustine.
and
None
but
of those none of
I
those
was
people were white. None
I
of them.
was I was starting with like the BC and moving my way up. I mean, when we get into like
Okay. Okay.
John Locke and Thomas Hobbes and all the Enlightenment thinkers and all the different
Can we start? Can we just skip the middle and start with George Washington?
or all the
I mean,
thinkers
he's white. There's no doubt about that.
or all the thinkers that led to the birth of our nation and the Magna Carta and all this different stuff.
Thomas Jefferson,
Human,
Benjamin.
yeah, human liberty, scientific advancement, the arts, Da Vinci, Mozart, Bach, Beethoven. I mean, all these are white men. I mean, I have no problem sitting and saying that a lot of our history we're in debt to countless names of white men. And
So why
I
is
have
it
no
so?
issues
So
with it.
Devin, why is it? Let me cut you off again. Why is it that we can't say that? Lead me down the slippery slope that if we say that leads to terrorism and white supremacy and taking over. I know what it is. I know the academic argument. I want to know if you know.
I think it's about they want division. It's I think it's very clear the left wing thrives on political division from identity politics. They love it. If they did not have that, they would struggle very bad in a lot of demographics. If they lose just 5 to 10% of the minority vote in this country, they're doomed. They've got to continue to. They got to pander to minorities, and the big way to do
Is
that.
that pandering though?
Absolutely, and the right wing panders to people too in different ways, but they absolutely are pandering to. They're always posing as the saviors, and then they demonize those that are saying, I disagree. I believe that this has been, that they've been using us for years, and But I think that there's a big division that they want us fighting along all these different lines.
Okay,
But
let me interrupt again. Okay, so now let me take you back to our conversation a few minutes ago where we talked about the idea that we move in increments. Sociologically, politically, legislatively, we move in tiny increments to move the clock one way or the other. To move the pendulum one way or the other, we have to move in tiny increments because the United States is a democracy, and because everyone has a right to speak, more or less, that allows people to vote for a particular process that we know is not going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to snap your fingers, but it's going to do something. Okay, so having said that, now what? Take me from there.
So repeat what you were asking me
Okay,
about.
okay. So we started with the slippery slope, okay? And the slippery slope was the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act was more or less about thought police, and it allowed them to come into your home, that them as in the government of the United States of America, to come into your homes, specifically the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, etc., to come into your home and check and see if you might be a threat to the American way of life. From that, we led to, okay, I had a friend that posted today that she had seen something several days ago by an African American leader, a woman in her community that's African American, and she's a leader of the African American Black Lives Matter movement, I believe. I can't swear to that, but she posted that she had to go home and think about this for 3 or 4 days and absorb this to decide whether or not she could even say, is there a place where I can say I'm proud to be white the way they were? Because here's what happened. They say I'm the daughter of slaves and people who were captured and natives who did this and that. I say I'm my genealogy shows that I'm the daughter of kings and queens in Africa. Okay, great, good for you. When can I say I'm the son of kings and queens in the UK and that be okay? Why is that not okay, but the other is? And she was literally asking, and keep in mind, this is a far left progressive, way beyond anything I am. I'm a far left liberal. She's a far left progressive who has taught me a lot, and I've learned a lot from her, and I respect her for it. But she has gotten to a point where she feels like she's alienated just because she's Caucasian, and that her children are alienated because they're Caucasian. And she's asking, when in this historical event of humanity, of new civilization, which started 10,000 years ago, recorded civilization, when can I say white people did this really well and we didn't use people, we just did this? When am I okay to say white pride for this? When am I okay to do that? And that question is enormous. Now I understand. I understand that just saying the words white pride brings up all kinds of problems. And I understand that there are people watching this who will say, you're a racist piece of shit. I don't care. Who cares? Write me a letter, respond, talk to me, educate me. But that's what I'm asking you, Devin. As somebody who's not maybe, you don't lean as a liberal, which in my eyes you really are very much. But I know to your line of thinking, you don't lean that way because of your theological persuasions. I'm asking you, when can this person find a place in history to say, I'm proud to be white because of this? Now, you gave me a bunch of things that were Greek, which were Egyptian, which were Persian. That's what I couldn't remember earlier, which were Persian, because really the Persians were the people who took the Israelites captive more than anyone else. And the Persians were the ones who actually set them free.
That's well known in scripture. I mean, most of like the half of the second half of the prophets is written during the Babylonian captivity. I mean, that's
You're
very
you're
well
you're,
known.
you're absolutely correct. But
Anyway,
most Christians can't answer that.
but
They're
what
gonna
you were,
they're gonna say, "Oh, Egypt, Pharaoh,"
well, that was
right?
just a small.
Because
That
they
was a
saw the
small
Ten
part of
Commandments.
the. That was a small part of the Bible during Joseph and
You're correct. They saw the Ten
Moses.
Commandments. So
But
from there,
what I was saying,
so unpack that.
what I brought up a lot more than just some Greeks. I just kind of started there when I was going down the line of typical Western civilization course of the type of names you're going to learn about. You're going to learn about Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, and then you're going to go up into stuff like in about the third century with people like Augustine, and then into Thomas Aquinas in the Middle Ages, and you're going to get into the Enlightenment thinkers and the Renaissance. And when you get into the Renaissance and the Enlightenment thinkers, and really the past 1,000 years, you're talking mainly Western Europeans from like Germany and England and France and all these different areas. I mean, most of our great composers were German, and
Okay.
but for your question, I mean,
So are Germans Caucasian?
they're not from the mountains of Caucasus. They're not from the Caucasus Mountains. So,
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm
they're
just trying to pose a question that's hard to answer.
I typically define white people, if you want to put it that way, as Europeans, and I think that most of the identity movements are more about looking into their European heritage. That we are European immigrants to this land from a European heritage. I'm not so much. I'm not really a big guy on heritage though. But if you're asking,
I'm,
I really don't care. Like it's not something that I really. It's seriously something
could care less.
that I go through my day about, and I feel like has very little to do with me, and I really don't care. But if you're asking,
So why are you suffering from white guilt and white shame?
I'm not. I don't, and I don't.
No. Why are you supposed to be?
I have never really understood the argument. It's very shallow and very stupid to me, and I feel like
Do you believe you have white male privilege?
I don't feel like I was privileged compared to my contemporaries of my same culture that were minority that were minorities. No, if I would have.
Do you believe you were equal with David Love? You guys grew up in the same town, same era. Are you guys equal?
I don't know Dave's childhood, but I know there were. I had black friends that were more privileged than I was, that had two-parent household, that had much more wealth in their home, that were treated very good, who didn't have to deal with a alcoholic mother, who did not have to deal with rampant poverty, who did not have to go to work at 15, who did not struggle with the kind of insecurities that I had, that were not ashamed of their home like I was. I know that and I know for a fact that there's people that I've seen that were minorities who grew up very poor, and white people that grew up very wealthy and very that I can think of two brothers right now that grew up super wealthy white boys and lived in the best neighborhood in town. Lived in these little um, you know areas outside of the city, and were very wealthy, that they both got hooked on drugs, never did a thing with their life. They've been in and out of jail their whole life, and now they're bums. And I've known black kids and other minority kids that grew up very struggling very much, but applied themselves and are doing great today. And I feel like if I would have coupled my upbringing with having a bunch of kids out of wedlock, didn't graduate high school, got involved with a bunch of crime, I feel like I would be in a really bad place right now. Instead of the fact that I kept my nose clean, I did have a child out of wedlock, but one, and I finished high school, I went and got my CDL, and was willing to work. And
does that mean that you made a choice, and that who you were before you made that choice was what overcame the obstacles?
A lot of it was the grace of God too, because I was 18 years old. I was selling.
So you got lucky.
I was selling drugs at a time. I was driving intoxicated. I was doing some criminal stuff when I was young too. I was in and out of the D home. I wasn't a great kid when I was growing up, but I did end up getting through high school, luckily. But I almost dropped out after my freshman year. but I stayed with it. Did 5.5 years of high school and got out of there. But if you're talking about stuff like why we have like the NAACP, the advancement of colored people and stuff, but we don't have like white institutions, I would.
I'm not talking about that at all.
Well,
because that's ridiculous to even argue. That is not what I'm talking about.
I would like to see a day where we don't have any of those institutions, where it's not something that we're really looked at.
Well, that'd be great. You're right. If it's not necessary. Do you think it's not necessary now? Do you think it's doing more damage than good?
I'm not against the NAACP, but I'm also not against politicizing race anymore. I really feel like it's something that needs to be left in the past. I think that we've advanced past this. I mean, over 90% of Americans right now are supporting interracial marriage.
You think that
Absolutely.
The United States has gone past racism?
I absolutely do. And what I believe could prove that is if Ben Carson would have won the nomination instead of Donald Trump, all the same people that are crying about white nationalists would have been flocking to the polls to vote for Ben Carson over Hillary Clinton. It's about ideology.
Devin, I got to cut in on you on that one and tell you that I think you're off your rocker on that.
I know you do, but
okay. Let me explain why. Let me
measure it to give me some kind of measurements on it, because all the statistics are showing that we're moving so radically in the past 50 years in the right direction, and this disproportionate focus on it. I would say less than 10% of the population is hardcore rabid racist. Yet we focus so much of our conversations on it, and I don't see the point.
But here's the other part: less than 10% of the population are not white. Do you agree with that?
Less than 10% of the population are not white.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit off. I think it's 12% of the population are African American or of African descent.
This country is going to be primarily white people are not going to be the majority of the people in like 20 years.
We're already not the majority. If we define ourselves as white, we're already not.
Anybody who goes out and spends a good deal of time out on the East Coast knows that this country is not rabidly racist. We do not have a problem taking in immigrants from Central American countries, from Middle Eastern countries. It is flooded with nothing but Hispanics and Middle Eastern people with Middle Eastern descent. Anybody who goes down south, dude, that was one thing that surprised me.
Okay, stop right there. Whoa, time out. I'm going to tell you right now that racism in Alabama, in Georgia, in Mississippi, in South Carolina, rampant.
Well, that's funny because
don't let the sun shine. Don't let the sun set on your ass.
Yeah,
I'm sure you have. All over those states, I know that for a fact.
I'm sure you have.
I've seen them. I've been to them. I've talked to the people in them, and you know what they say? They go, "So what?"
I've seen more racial harmonious in the South than I've anywhere else. I ran Canton, Mississippi 5 times a week for 3 years when I first started driving a truck. I've been all over Alabama. I've been to Louisiana. I've been all over Georgia. I've seen more interracial harmony down there under the pride of Southern culture than I have anywhere in the country. I've seen more black Americans.
Are they waving Confederate flags?
I've seen more black people. That's something that took me by shock, because when I first started driving a truck, I was a notorious liberal. I go down there, and pretty much during the big whole Southern flag crisis around 2012, 2013, and I'm seeing black men getting out of Chevy pickup trucks with, the Gaston flag flying out their back of their truck all the time, looking like they're Chris Ledoux, dressed up in cowboy boots and Wranglers and cowboy.
Who's Chris Ledoux?
Country singer. I mean, these were country chewing on toothpicks with cowboy hats. These were in every one of them have, I mean, they have their own lingo. They have their own, like I've always said that going out to the East Coast, you're going to be greeted with, a waiter's going to greet you with, you know what the hell you want? And, they might come back in 2 minutes later and they expect you to be ready to order and they're not going to greet you at all. You go down south, you're going to get greeted by a heavy set lady who's going to ask you, what you thirsting on and do you want a sip and stick and telling you to take your time, honey. And I love the South. There's not a place in this country I like more than I do the South.
Look, I'm not. Let me clarify. So let me clarify. First and foremost, I'm not against the South. I'm not trying to say that the Dixie Democrats abandoned us and that I hate them for it or anything like that. I know why they did it. And it was not a matter of race so much as it was a matter of they felt betrayed by their party because they said, we're not ready for that. Well, at some point, these are those monumental moments when we step forward with legislation and with government where we say, no, we're done with segregation. No more of that nonsense. It's done. And the only way to end this covert racism, not to mention the overt racism. Okay, so covert means under, overt means
I know the terms. It's just how are these? I hear these kind of terms thrown out all the time, and nobody can ever give me examples of how this is measured.
Okay,
like, I don't.
Well, hold on. So what I'm saying is this: I don't disagree with you that overtly racism does not exist as much as it did before. And part of the reason for that is because the minority is now at least even, if not the majority. And so now they have to whisper N-word instead of saying N-word. Okay.
This is just a theory that we don't even know what. I mean,
I'm
sure we've heard this, but I'm just saying that from my experience as somebody who has traveled all around this country, there's so much misconceptions. You go down south, which is notoriously the racist part of the country, you're going to find diners full of black and white people sitting at tables together, sharing coffee together, talking together, sharing the same lingo, sharing the same culture. You go out east, you go into New York City, where I spent 3 years of my life running in and out of Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, and stuff. And yeah, you'll find a melting pot. You'll find all sorts of different cultures, but guess what they also have? You'll find literally enclaves in Brooklyn where blocks and blocks and blocks of Jewish settlers. You'll find Chinatown. You'll find Little Italy. You'll find little areas where these ethnic groups are congregating at. And you want to talk about hearing some racist stuff. I've heard been sitting at a diner at Hunts Point Meat Market in the Bronx, and I've heard people coming in there yelling offensive racial slurs like, F you, bro, I paid you yesterday, let me eat you, effing so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. Then you're yelling back, like hurling racial insults out there to them people. They'll insult you by what town you're coming from. You walk in there, and you're in the Bronx and you're wearing a Boston Red Sox hat, we got Boston on our. I've seen that stuff. It cracked me up. I used to sit there and laugh because I could not believe the way they talk to each other.
You know what, Devin? I've been a Cowboys fan since I was 6 years old. I don't know why. I do know why. They had the better looking cheerleaders on the poster. That's all it was. The Dallas Cowboys put out a poster with this super hot cheerleader on the front of it. She was standing like this in her boots and her little cowboy, and I became a Dallas Cowboys fan. That's it. That's the only reason that I was a Dallas Cowboys fan. So what I'm saying is this. Tribalism is the real culprit here. That's what I've been trying to get back to, but I wanted to hear you say it organically. And you just did, but you didn't label it tribalism. So what I'm saying is this. I have friends who live in Alabama, specifically Huntsville, Alabama, where, by the way, Huntsville is named after a notorious Nazi who got us to the moon, right? So I mean, without Huntsville, we're not on the moon, the whole thing. But so Huntsville has a huge space center in it. It has an enormous amount. It's a melting pot in every way. But whites and blacks do not mix. Although coming from the north as a Yankee, as it were, as an Indiana boy, a farm boy, I was like, I can't tell the difference between the way you talk and the way he talks at all. And they go, and they said this, go to a black Walmart and you'll find out. These are educated, intelligent, intellectually gifted people who in reality, I don't believe they have a single racist bone in their body. But because of the dissection between black and white that has existed down there and continues to exist, and what I'm saying is I'm beginning to believe you might be right that the Democrat Party is actually trying to keep them separate so that they can maintain those votes, because there's very few of them. Because in 64 and 65, when LBJ said, you know what, we're going to do this no matter what, and we're going to pass Kennedy's dream, and we're going to get the Civil Rights Bill through, which happened in 64 and ultimately hit in 65. Most people don't know that, but it really started in 65, which means in 66 it actually took effect.
Yeah, but Chad, you know that LBJ was also.
He said we lost the Democrat Party for the next 20 years, and he was wrong. We lost it for the next 50 years. So what I'm saying is this: I'm trying to get to a point where through discussion and dialogue, we have discovered that there is a divisiveness that is racial, that has nothing at all to do with the proximity of one person to another, that it has to do with media, and it has to do with governmental ideologies that have reigned supreme for decades, and those have to be overturned. Do you agree with that? And what are your thoughts on it?
Well, what was the exact question again? Because you said a lot there.
Okay, so to wrap up that question, so you don't have to unpack everything. Is it governmental? Is it intentional divisiveness, or is it divisiveness that comes from people living together? That's a hard question to ask, hard to answer.
See, I don't agree. There are like white supremacists and racial segregationists on all sides that do believe that racial elements.
Are they minorities or majorities?
There are racial segregationists who do believe that.
Are they majority or minority?
There are racial segregationists who do believe that racists don't that different races don't blend well together, and they'll use stuff like, for example, with churches, they tend to congregate toward their own race. I do not believe that. I do believe that it's been.
Is that minority or majority?
Today,
right now.
I believe it's a minority. I've said that for about an hour and a half now. That I believe it's a vast minority.
How vast? 5%, 20%?
5 to 10%, maybe. I mean, I think that this is such an overblown problem these days that
you believe. So if I'm hearing you right, through the eyes of what every progressive is going to hear, you are defending the white supremacist, right? I'm not saying you're doing that. I don't believe you're doing that. And for the record, he's not doing that. That's not at all what he's talking about. Listen to the goddamn show. What I'm saying is this. Are there people out there who want to keep the impression that that white supremacy, for example, exists in a drastic fashion?
Yeah, I think it's called. I think it's called left-wing ideologues.
Are there people on the right who are doing the same thing and want to say these people love the LGBT, queers and the whole whatever they say about that nonsense? I don't talk about my own sexuality because it's insulting to me and it's beneath me. But are there people who would hate me for my sexuality?
For most right-wing ideologues,
Right? Is it?
I'm trying to follow what you're asking me.
Is it equal, Devin? Are there equally people who say I'm on the right?
It's so much
and I hate anybody who's not a white person. If they're Jewish, if they're black, if they're Hispanic, they gotta go. We gotta shoot them. We gotta kill them. We gotta put them in ovens. We gotta starve them to death. And on the left, is it these white racist son of a bitches have to go? They have to be eliminated. They're disgusting. They're all Nazis and they need to be destroyed. Is it equal? Are there equal people on both sides?
Not at all. I think it's vastly disproportionate on the left. Vastly. I've listened to both sides.
You think the left is far more race-oriented, sex-oriented, religiously oriented, theologically oriented than you do the right?
I don't know about theologically oriented. I think that'd be more on the right. But definitely, when it comes to this fixation on racism and racial identity and stuff, I see that so much more on the left. And I've listened to left. I mean, for example, I've read a lot of left wing literature. I still to a degree am a big fan of people like Noam Chomsky and Chris Hedges, and I used to listen to Democracy Now! I used to be a subscriber to the Nation magazine. I used to, listen to different MSNBC shows and ideologues and stuff like the Young Turks and RT and Al Jazeera and different things like that. I've heard all these arguments, and they are so fixated.
You used to.
I still listen to them because I enjoy good debate. I enjoy to know I can define both sides. I understand where they come.
Why do you not believe what Noam Chomsky says anymore, though?
I do agree with a lot of things Noam Chomsky. I just don't agree with him on his economic policies, but I do think I do think that he's pretty accurate on a lot of things in terms of Western imperialism and stuff. I mean, I think that he's
of course. Okay, let's skip that.
But
forget Chomsky. The Young Turks. Why do you disagree?
I think that they're the worst people.
Why do you disagree with the Young Turks? Tell me what is wrong with what they're saying.
Because they pose as an alternative media, and they're totally just a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party. I dislike them worse than I do CNN or MSNBC or whatever. And I
you believe that the Democratic Party themselves are racist.
I didn't say they're racist. I said that they are definitely using race as a crutch to create division and to create voting blocks among minority voters. They use race to pander to minority voters because it's the same way that the right uses Christianity. They pander.
Okay. So wait a minute. Let me cut you off. I know this is frustrating, but let me cut you off because I'm trying to stick to a point here. Okay, so if they use race and they say, if these people are racist because they say A, B, C, and D, tell me what A, B, C, and D are. Tell me what those racial divisions that they use are. Define those first, and then we'll get to the next part.
Explain what you're asking there a little bit better.
what I'm asking is, if you're saying that the Democrat Party says that they're using race to create divisiveness to keep a particular race on their side. So give me some examples of that.
Well, they talk about things like affirmative action. They bring up different. I mean, right now,
do you believe that affirmative action isn't something that's needed?
well, I think affirmative action would have been something I would have definitely supported in the 1960s and the 1970s, because it was something that was about affirming that people that were being excluded should be included, and I would have supported that. Well, I'm not. No, I don't judge. I'm not a racist. I don't believe that black people should be held to a different standard than white people should. I think that they are totally capable of rising and falling on their own merits, like I am. I've known black individuals that are way smarter than I am, and way more capable, better dressed, better thinkers, better social skills, better athletes, better parents, better employees. And I'm not gonna sit and say, oh, they need a special form of retribution and so a special form of pick me up.
Okay. Let me cut you off right there then. So let's go right to reparations.
I can't believe this has just turned all into about race, but the reparations.
That's what we've been talking about the whole time. Because remember, we started talking about the Patriot Act is leading to a slippery slope. The slippery slope is who is going to be identified as a terrorist. And right now, the people that suddenly are trying to be identified, that seem to be on trial for being terrorists, are white separatists. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think that people are over. I mean, I'm not
saying they're good people, but
I'm not a fan of.
Don't they have a right to be separate if they want to be?
I believe people have the right to voluntarily associate with whoever they feel they want to.
In my opinion, Ali was a separatist.
I don't think that that's something that we can control. And if you say you do want to control that, well, then just admit you're a totalitarian. Because you want a totalitarian is about controlling the totality of an individual, including his own thoughts.
So let me take you back in our conversation. So then we started talking about, I had a friend post today that she had seen a minority leader talk about minority matters, and she went home and had to go through white, Caucasian, European history and say, is there ever a time I can tell my kids? I tell them, this is privilege. This is male privilege. This is white privilege. This is male white privilege, which is a totally separate and different thing. And this person could not find a way. It took her 3 days to even post the idea that she could question this as a white woman, as a white mother. Does she have the right to say, when do I get to say in history, you can be proud of this? Because they're talking about my mom and dad were kings and queens. I don't know what you're talking about, slaves, but I'm talking about my mother and father being kings and queens. How dare you? How dare you relegate me to the position of being a child of a slave? I'm the child of royalty, which in and of itself is just repulsive to me. The whole idea of royalty in my eyes is disgusting. But I won't get into that.
Well, it's definitely not an American tradition.
So what I'm asking you is this. We went from there all the way through. We talked about how the South broke apart from civil rights from 64, 65, 66 with LBJ and how all that happened after Kennedy, and how they broke apart, and how Lyndon B. Johnson said, we're going to lose this for the next 10 years, and it wound up being 50. And then that led our conversation to, okay, so is the South really that racist? And you go, no, I've been there. If you want to see racism, go to the East Coast. They're as tribal as it gets. And so what I'm asking you to do now is I'm asking you to wrap this up for me, put it in a bundle, and tell me your final thoughts on this.
Well, real quick on the LBJ thing. I mean, I'm not sure exactly if I understand what you're talking about, but it sounds to me like you're revising history a lot, because LBJ might have passed the Civil Rights Movement, but the Civil Rights Act, but he was a notorious racist. And
horrible human being.
And on top of that, he has been quoted by multiple historians and I think he's even caught on recordings talking about how we're going to get, them to vote Democrat for the next 50 years. If they lost some with passing of the Civil Rights Act, they want it back with welfare, because even Bill Clinton understood that, and the Democrats in the 90s understood that they broke up the black family and just completely destroyed it by design through welfare. And anybody who tries to argue that is just ignoring the statistics, because it came in.
Devin, don't go there. Don't go there.
There's a perfect correlation. There's a perfect correlation. They'll tell you. How do we know this stuff? They'll tell you. They'll tell you that's what happened. That's why they left. That's why they don't marry. That's why they don't. I know that from multiple races these days. It's definitely not just a black thing now. It's a multi. We demonize stuff like Putin's Russia, but they incentivize marriage over in Russia. Here we incentivize not getting married. We incentivize giving out benefits to stay unwed.
So when my wife and I, who had been together at that point, 15 years, 12 years, whatever it was, during the Bush administration, didn't get our $600 check for being married. You're gonna tell me that was somehow racially motivated? Come on, man.
That was racially motivated.
That's ridiculous. The idea that families were broken up because they wanted to make sure that families were broken up so that they could be dependent on welfare.
That's not a right wing talking. That's just an economics.
George W. Bush said, I'm going to give every married couple $600 extra back in 3 months just for being married, because we want to support marriage. So you can't lay that on the Democrats. I'm not talking the 2000s. I'm talking the 1960s when the black Americans had the most. They were born in wedlock the most. They were definitely the tightly knit family that had the lowest divorce rates. And everything changed when welfare was instituted. I don't see how anybody can deny that. That's been so proven for so long. And Bill Clinton and the Democrats in the 90s even realized that and corrected it, and did a great deal of correcting that, because they understood that was a problem. That's completely mixing subjects, and we don't have time to go into that. And that's a podcast in and of itself. We will have. I promise you, we will go through that. But what I'm asking you right now is this: what I want you to do is I want you to tell me the slippery slope. We started talking about the Patriot Act. From there, we went to, hey, I have a friend who said, why can't I say white pride about this thing? Why can't I say you should be proud that your race of people did this? Now, personally, my response to that is, who gives shit what race did it? You should be proud of it because a human being did it. It's ridiculous to break this up into races and be divisive. That in and of itself is the divisiveness that continues. That's the conjecture that continues to extrapolate from all of these ideologies, the nonsense that we hear, and that we never actually get to the core of the problem. You and I are uncensored, and we can talk about this like we do on the phone 3 nights a week until 4 in the morning. And I'm asking you to sum this up for me before we go. We've been on an hour and a half, I think. I'm asking you to sum up the entirety of this conversation, and I'm going to give you 10 minutes. And here you are live. You're the only one they can see. Go. And I'll stop.
Well, I don't need 10 minutes. I mean, I think that, when it comes to being proud of our heritage, I mean, it's just not something that I really think about too much, but I am very, first off, I don't take pride in the accomplishments of others. I'm more thankful for stuff. And I'm thankful to be a Westerner. I'm thankful to live in the United States of America. I'm thankful for the great men and great thinkers that came before us that developed beautiful forms of art and developed the knowledge and through a lot of repetition in mathematics and science and all the different trials and errors that society ran with and discarding what didn't work and keeping what does work in terms of the social fabric that I feel is being completely discarded today in a moral revolution, but that's a different podcast. But in terms of, each individual culture, there's contributions that I love about all of them. I think there's really cool things about Mexican Latino architecture and Chinese architecture and Middle Eastern architecture and African architecture. I think there's interesting music from every culture. I think there's interesting cuisine from every culture. And I think that kind of diversity is a good thing. I enjoy that. I would not that's something I loved about New York. I love, I love to get some pastrami and, get some different kind of, there's like this little Indian deli I used to stop into in Brooklyn all the time that I really liked. There's, and I enjoy like a lot of different, cultures in their customs. But this idea that we're supposed to just, curse European culture and European contributions to the advancement of civil society, I think is, just, fraught with, historical ignorance and just a political agenda of identity politics that's not helpful to anybody or anything.
Well, what about imperialism? I know I said I wasn't going to step in, but where does imperialism fall on that? Because the UK that's the imperialist society other than Rome and Persia.
Yeah, and if they wouldn't have been it, then Islam would have taken all over Europe too. If somebody's going to colonize the world. If it weren't for the Crusades, Islam would have probably taken over a large swath of Europe, and we would have a totally different history today. And China, if they were a little bit more mobilized, a little bit more advanced through their time period during the Middle Ages, they would have probably advanced a lot more westward. Things have happened for this idea that we can only point toward the sins of one specific demographic while ignoring the motivations of every other civilization that's ever came before us is just nonsense. But we do that because I have a theory of it. Is number one, there's a political motivation today, but I think historically it's been done because that's the history that we're taught. It's more common to us. We know our own history. We know the sins of and I think it's good. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it's good for us to do a little bit of self-reflecting and looking at where we went wrong. But at the same time, the question that is never asked, that I never asked for a long time, as a liberal, as a libertarian, when I had this angst about imperialism and colonialism and military endeavors and all these different things, the question I never asked is what would have been the alternative. And I think that's what separates mature thinking from shallow thinking, is what would have been the alternative. And what would have been the alternative to leaving the Middle East a vacuum? What would have been the alternative to doing nothing during the Crusades? What would have been the alternative to never, ever seeking to colonize North America? What would the world look like differently now today had it not been for that? Because you can make a strong argument that Europeans coming to colonize North America has led to the greatest advancement of a free society we've ever seen in the world in the United States of America.
Can I
So
can I take a time out?
yeah,
Okay, everything you just said, I agree with. Here's the problem. Everything you just said is built on the backs of slavery, white supremacy, male dominance, misogyny. The list goes on. So, how do you justify that and say, no matter what, it's still progress, and we still have vaccines, we still put a man on the moon, we still have an ability to communicate instantly through phones, we can do this. All of these things we can do because arguably Europeans came over to the United States. Europeans infested themselves into Africa. Europeans went into Asia. Europeans took over what was a lost continent at one point, and still sort of is, Australia. What is your response to that?
well, a couple things. Number one, this idea that slavery was unique to European imperialism and European colonialism, that is just insane. And second off, the colonization of Africa was not necessarily a bad thing, because it is very, very easy to show that the countries in Africa that were colonized by like the French and the British were so much more successful, so much more stable than those that weren't. And what would have been
what do you define as successful?
Stable. I'm not talking about necessarily ingenuity and innovation, economic boom. I think that comes second. It's so crazy to me because 5 years ago I would have never said this. I would have, and I think the libertarians have this definitely backwards. They see economics coming, that economics lead the train, and everything else, including national security, civilization, everything follows after that. I totally disagree. I think it's.
I totally disagree as well.
I think it's national security. I think it's law and order. I think if you are not going, I think a perfect example of that is looking down at Mexico. You're not going to have the kind of innovation and the kind of economic investment in capital in societies that are unstable with their law and order. There's not going to be companies that are going to want to invest in that.
Devin, can we back up for just a moment and recognize that there was no such thing as globalism back then?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a big change in our society now, is that capital travels to other lands a lot faster, goods travel to lands faster. And
So because of that, going back to this person that I know on Facebook who would ask a question, is there a point in history where I can say we can be proud of this? Is there a point in history we can be proud of that, where we didn't do it on the backs of slavery and white supremacy and male dominance? And is there a point where I know the answer to it myself, but I want to hear what your point is, and I don't want to lead you to it. I want to hear what your point is, honestly.
I mean, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, number one, most of the Industrial Revolution had nothing to do with the minds of slaves. They might have been the backbone. In fact, the industrialization probably led more to ending slavery than anything else, because there could have never been a bullet fired, and something like the cotton gin, like with Eli Whitney, it would have
Right.
been completely unfeasible to try to house and take care of slaves. And when we look at railroads and when we look at the arts, as I mentioned, we look at all the different scientific advancements and scientific studies. None of that had to do with color. None of that. I mean, it might have been white people that mainly got there, but I think a lot of that was just from their heritage and what was taught from them growing up. And I think a lot of the problems with what we define
But
as
Devin, but Devin, how much of it had to do with the idea of control, power, status, elitism?
well, every
How much
society.
how much of it had to do with the idea that white men ruled the world?
Well, you do. I mean, I think the person who's done, which I recommend everybody to read, is Thomas Sowell, and his book Race and Economics. I think is one of the. He's a black man. Is one of the best books I've ever read, and he laid it out very simplistically but very perfectly. The reason why we condemn. First off, every society had caste system. You had the nobles, you had the priests, and you had the commoners. Every society had that, and then you had slaves underneath them. Every society.
Right.
Slavery was actually indentured servitude. Used to be a form of keeping you from being destitute and wandering in the wilderness in like the Middle East and Africa and being left hopeless to where there wasn't a social safety net.
People actually wanted indentured servitude.
Absolutely, and you didn't just and this idea that the vast majority of them just beat them all the time. I mean, you don't beat your workhorse. You tried to take care of them. I think it's a total horrible practice because I don't think anybody should be forced to labor against their will and be housed like property. I think that's insane. But
see, now we get into a point where we have to talk about how they tortured slaves. What slave quarters,
separating
clothes,
separating
nutrition.
Yeah, but at the same time, is that wise policy as a master, quote unquote, to mistreat your slaves and malnourish them and beat them and separate them from their family and make them miserable and unhappy and willing to die? I mean, is that wise strategy on any of their part? I mean, come on. I mean, it doesn't take long to think through this.
Okay, so
and the main reason.
Let me get back. Let me get back to this, Devin, because we're out of time, and I really want to get your final thoughts on this. So this person is on Facebook, and they're saying, I'm a far left progressive. I have campaigned. I've done everything I can. I teach my children about white privilege, about male privilege, about hypermasculinity, about toxic masculinity. I teach all of these things. And when I go to this, all I hear is condemning the white race. And I don't hear anything good about what I can tell my children their race has done, but I can tell them 1,000 things good that this race has done. They created a stoplight and chocolate, and I could go on and on and on and on and on about Black History Month, which great, they have Black History Month. I can care less one way or another.
I'm all for
when I say they, I mean they, because I'm not black.
I enjoy Black History Month. I support.
It's
Black
great,
History
whatever.
Month.
I could care less. But what I am asking is this: I'm asking you to wrap it up and say, how does this girl answer every shitty thing that she's being called right now by her own people? By her own people, what does she say?
I would tell her I would do what I do and just label me what you want. I know you're not going to tell me what I am. You're not going to tell me how I think, and you're not going to tell me I'm subconsciously biased and all this. But I don't live it. But I'm subconsciously biased, and I'm racist, and I'm inherently racist because of my race. Like it's
that's ad hominem. That's your personal belief. I'm asking you to give her an academic argument.
I'm saying, give me a second to explain myself here a little bit, but the idea that I would just tell her, facts are facts. You look at the history, you examine it, and you say what it was. I don't even care. And if you want to bring up what race these people were, that's your thing. But when it comes to, what I was talking about with Thomas Sowell and slavery in the United States, slavery existed everywhere else. The main reason that it was delegated toward African Americans was because of our Constitution, because of our Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. So what do they have to do to this different race that didn't look like them, was from a totally different continent? Well, they had to dehumanize them in order to justify their behavior and treatment of them, is the why they did that. And it was wrong. It was totally wrong. And the thing that bothers me the most about so much is that I've never been a Toby Keith conservative, as I call it, the pom pom wearing, we'll put a boot in your ass, it's the American way, conservative of just ultra nationalist. America can do no wrong. That's never been me. But at the same,
country singer, right?
yeah. But at the same time, um, America does not get enough credit for what the triumph on race relations. And we have we have a great, great triumphant history on race. I mean, we have come so far, and we all of our academics on all sides repudiate the disgusting history of slavery and all that. It's a black stain on us. And yeah, you'll have fringe radical groups that love racism and don't and hate minorities and stuff, but they're shouted down on all sides. The right does not want to identify them. The left doesn't wants to ban them from public discourse. So they're not. They're fringe of the fringe. And I repudiate neo-Nazism. And even when it comes to Nazism, America has a great history of fighting and ending and liberating an entire continent from Nazi Germany. So
My grandfather was there.
So this idea of collectively demonizing America and labeling it this and that, when we've made such strides in appeasing for our past sins and atoning for our past sins. And today we are living in such a day of racial harmonization and racial tolerance and racial understanding and racial beauty. I mean, it's, just like with what we were talking about earlier about that girl that got strangled over in Gas City. When that search and rescue team was going out looking for this little 10-year-old white girl, it didn't matter what color we were. It didn't matter what we were, whether we were Democrat or Republican. Our humanity struck in. And if it would have been a little black girl, it would have been the same thing.
Absolutely.
And this idea that our humanity, that good people don't make up the majority and are not going to be out there hunting down perpetrators that would hurt a young child, whether he's black, white, Latino, whatever. I totally disagree with that. And anybody who's trying to say that the vast majority of a certain demographic doesn't care, I think it's just wrong. I think it's dishonest, and I don't identify with. I don't identify with people that would think that defines any certain demographic. Because I totally disagree.
So here's what I'm going to wrap this up with. Devin and I both agree, as someone who identifies with the right and someone who identifies with the far left. And I don't think that Devin identifies with the far right so much as the far left, especially the progressive left, will identify him as a far right. So that's not fair in and of itself. They identify me as a centrist now, when I'm about as far left as you can get. I'm a bleeding heart, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. With lots of flaws, lots of problems, lots of issues of my own. But what we can all agree on is that we're all one people. We're all human beings. We're all floating around on this giant blue rock in the middle of nothingness. And when you pull back and you see the picture of the earth from a billion miles away, you really start to understand how tiny and lucky we are to be here. Let's not let something so insignificant. And so let's not let the minutia pull us apart through language and alphabet soup and word stew. And let's start to find reasons to be together, to love one another, to appreciate each other. Thank God that we have multiculturalism. I'm so sick and tired of hearing the appropriation issues. That, you know, you appropriated this from this culture or that culture. Thank God we appropriated that, because if we didn't, I wouldn't know anything about jazz. And I love jazz. And frankly, none of you would know anything about rock and roll, because rock and roll came from Chuck Berry. Not Elvis, Chuck Berry. So before you shoot your guns, I'm asking you, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Let's give peace a chance. Let's try to get together. Let's try to find where we intersect as human beings, rather than where we have nothing in common. And from there, let's try to build bridges instead of walls. That's what I'm asking you for. This has been the Chadillac Chat. That's Devin Miller, a very good friend of mine on a completely different spectrum. But when it comes right down to it, does it really sound like we're that far apart? I don't think so. And what I want you to remember is this. We're all human beings. We're all working on this together. And we're all trying to get through this life one day at a time. Peace, love, and understanding is the most important thing we can do. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. Kindness is perfect expression. Above all, be kind. Namaste. Thank you, Devin. I appreciate it, man.
Oh, good night, Chad.